For years, the Duggar family built a massive public image around faith, family values, and strict moral beliefs. To millions of viewers watching TLC's 19 Kids and Counting, the family represented discipline, religion, and the picture of a tightly controlled Christian household. But behind that carefully crafted reality television empire, controversy has followed the family for years. And now, another major legal setback involving Josh Duggar is putting the family back in the headlines once again. This time, a judge has officially rejected Josh Duggar's request for a new trial, and the reason is shocking to many observers. According to court filings, the motion was denied because it was mailed too late. That single detail has now triggered intense online debate. Was this simply a legal technicality? Did Josh Duggar's legal team make a major mistake that destroyed any chance of reconsideration? Or was this motion always viewed as a long shot from the very beginning? As reactions continue spreading online, many people are now questioning what this latest ruling could mean for Josh Duggar's future, his remaining legal options, and the continued public fallout surrounding one of reality television's most controversial families. Because for critics of the Duggar family, this ruling represents yet another chapter in a scandal that has already permanently changed the family's public image. But for supporters, questions still remain about whether the legal process surrounding Josh Duggar has been fully exhausted, and whether additional appeals could still emerge in the future. And today, we're breaking down everything. From the judge's decision, to the timeline behind the filing, the legal arguments involved, the online reaction, and what could potentially happen next in a case that continues attracting massive public attention years after the original conviction. Because despite years of headlines, courtroom drama, and public controversy, the Duggar story may still be far from over. Before diving into the judge's ruling itself, it's important to understand why this case continues attracting so much public attention years after Josh Duggar's conviction. The Duggar family first rose to fame through the TLC reality series 19 Kids and Counting, where viewers watched Jim Bob Duggar and Michelle Duggar raise their massive family under strict religious beliefs, conservative values, and highly structured household rules. For years, the family built an image centered around morality, discipline, and traditional family life, and millions of viewers followed their journey. But over time, controversies surrounding Josh Duggar dramatically changed how many people viewed the family and their carefully crafted public image. Following his criminal conviction and prison sentence, Josh Duggar remained at the center of ongoing legal appeals, online debate, and widespread media coverage. Even years after the original trial, every new court filing, hearing, or legal motion continues generating major attention across social media, news outlets, and online discussion forums. And now, the latest development has reignited that attention once again. According to recent reports, a judge rejected a motion requesting a new trial because the filing was reportedly mailed too late and failed to meet strict court deadlines. At first glance, that might sound like a technical procedural issue. But inside the legal system, deadlines can become absolutely critical, especially in major criminal cases where appeals and post-conviction motions are tightly regulated by court rules. In many situations, judges are required to follow strict procedural standards regardless of how controversial or high-profile a defendant may be. Missing a deadline by even a short amount of time can sometimes prevent an entire argument from being considered in court. That's one reason this ruling is now generating intense reactions online. Some observers argue the decision simply reflects standard legal procedure and accountability. Others believe any motion connected to such a high-profile case deserves maximum judicial review regardless of timing complications. And because the Duggar family has remained such a polarizing public figure for years, reactions to every legal development tend to become emotionally charged very quickly. Throughout today's video, we'll break down exactly what happened and why this ruling matters. As the latest legal developments involving Josh Duggar began circulating online, Many viewers immediately focused on one major headline: reports that the judge officially denied his request for a new trial. For supporters, critics, and longtime followers of the Duggar family controversies, the decision quickly became another major flashpoint in an already highly publicized case. But according to multiple reports discussing the ruling, the judge's decision was not necessarily centered on reexamining the broader arguments inside the motion itself. Instead, much of the attention focused on a procedural issue, specifically, claims that the filing was submitted after the required legal deadline had already passed. And that distinction is extremely important in the legal system. In criminal appeals and post-conviction proceedings, courts often operate under very strict filing deadlines. These timelines are not treated as casual recommendations. In many cases, they are considered mandatory procedural rules that attorneys and defendants are expected to follow precisely. If paperwork arrives too late, even by a relatively small amount of time, judges may reject the filing without ever fully considering the substance of the arguments being presented. That reality surprised many online observers following the case. Across social media discussions, some people questioned how something as simple as mailing dates or paperwork timing could potentially determine whether a request for a new trial even gets heard. Others argued that if serious legal claims are being raised, courts should prioritize reviewing the evidence itself rather than focusing heavily on procedural technicalities. But legal experts frequently point out that procedural deadlines exist for a reason. The court system relies heavily on standardized rules and timelines in order to function consistently. Without firm deadlines, cases could remain open indefinitely, appeals could become unpredictable, and courts would struggle to manage legal proceedings fairly across thousands of different cases. In that sense, filing requirements are viewed by many judges as essential to maintaining order and equal treatment under the law. That's why timing issues can become incredibly significant. One of the biggest points of confusion online involved the wording surrounding the filing itself. Some reports suggested the motion was mailed late, while others discussed whether it was received late by the court. To people outside the legal world, those differences may sound minor, but in legal proceedings, the distinction can matter enormously depending on the specific rules governing the filing process. Certain filings are judged based on the date they were mailed. Others depend on the date they were officially received and processed by the court clerk. In some situations, prison mail systems can also complicate timelines, especially when incarcerated individuals are involved in submitting legal documents. Because of that, procedural disputes over dates, timestamps, and filing requirements often become highly technical legal arguments on their own. And that complexity added even more confusion to the public conversation surrounding the ruling. Some commentators online expressed frustration, arguing that procedural rules can sometimes feel disconnected from the larger pursuit of justice. They believe courts should focus primarily on the strength or weakness of the legal arguments themselves rather than whether paperwork arrived on a specific day. But others strongly disagreed. Many legal analysts defended the court's strict enforcement of deadlines, arguing that consistency is a foundational part of the justice system. From their perspective, procedural rules apply to everyone equally, regardless of fame, media attention, or public opinion. Allowing exceptions in high-profile cases, they argue, could create unfair standards for ordinary defendants facing similar legal requirements. The debate quickly became another example of how divided public opinion remains whenever the Duggar case returns to the headlines. For longtime followers of the story, the ruling also served as a reminder that legal outcomes are not always determined by dramatic courtroom arguments or shocking evidence revelations. Sometimes cases are shaped by highly technical procedural rules that receive far less public attention, even though those rules can ultimately decide whether a motion moves forward at all. And in this situation, reports surrounding the timing of the filing appeared to become one of the central reasons the request for a new trial was rejected. But as soon as news of the rejection spread online, reactions quickly became deeply divided. As news of the judge's decision spread online, reactions exploded almost immediately across social media platforms, legal commentary channels, entertainment blogs, and discussion forums. Even though the Duggar family has largely disappeared from mainstream television, any legal update involving Josh Duggar still generates enormous public attention within hours. For many critics, the ruling felt predictable. A large number of online commenters argued that Josh Duggar has already exhausted nearly every realistic legal avenue available to him following his conviction. Some users pointed out that appellate courts and post-conviction motions operate under extremely strict procedural standards, and they argued that missing filing deadlines, even by a short amount of time, can completely derail a case regardless of the underlying arguments. Others defended the judge's decision as an example of the legal system functioning exactly the way it is designed to function. According to those observers, courts rely heavily on procedural consistency because deadlines exist to maintain fairness and order across the entire judicial process. Supporters of the ruling argued that if exceptions were routinely made for high-profile defendants, it could undermine confidence in the legal system itself. But not everyone agreed with that perspective. Some supporters of Josh Duggar, along with critics of rigid court procedures in general, expressed frustration that timing issues may prevent the actual claims inside the motion from receiving a more detailed review. Online discussions quickly emerged debating whether procedural technicalities sometimes overshadow broader questions about fairness, due process, and substantive legal arguments. Several commenters argued that courts should focus more heavily on the merits of a filing, rather than solely on whether paperwork arrived within a specific deadline window. Others pushed back strongly against that idea, saying procedural requirements are part of the legal process itself and cannot simply be ignored whenever a case attracts public sympathy or media attention. That debate helped fuel another massive wave of online engagement surrounding the Duggar family name. For years, the Duggars occupied a strange place in American pop culture. On one hand, they built a highly successful reality television brand centered around conservative Christian values, family unity, and moral discipline. On the other hand, the family has spent years surrounded by scandals, criticism, controversies, and intense media scrutiny that dramatically reshaped public perception. Because of that history, every legal development involving Josh Duggar tends to reignite much larger conversations that extend far beyond the courtroom itself. Some viewers see the case as part of a broader discussion about celebrity accountability, especially when public figures who once built careers around morality later become involved in criminal scandals. Others focus on the influence of reality television culture and how carefully managed public images can collapse under legal controversy. At the same time, discussions surrounding the Duggar family frequently reopen debates about religion, authority, parenting, public relations, and the pressures of maintaining a carefully controlled family brand under constant media attention. And despite the family no longer appearing regularly on television, public fascination clearly has not disappeared. Media outlets across entertainment news, legal analysis channels, YouTube commentary communities, and social media pages continue covering nearly every court update connected to Josh Duggar. Headlines about the denied motion quickly circulated online, drawing thousands of reactions, reposts, debates, and opinion threads within a very short period of time. Part of that ongoing attention comes from how deeply embedded the Duggar family once became within reality television culture. For over a decade, viewers watched the family present themselves as an example of faith-based living and traditional values. Because of that visibility, many people still feel personally invested in the family's public downfall and continuing legal troubles. Others simply view the case as another example of how celebrity status often magnifies criminal proceedings far beyond what would normally happen in a typical courtroom dispute. And that's why each new legal ruling tends to generate not only legal analysis, but emotional reactions as well. Some people interpret the denial of the motion as closure, a sign that the courts are moving toward finality after years of appeals and legal battles. Others remain frustrated that procedural timing issues may prevent further examination of the arguments raised by the defense. But regardless of where public opinion falls, one reality remains clear. The Duggar family name still carries enormous controversy years after their television empire collapsed. And every new court development continues reopening debates about justice, accountability, fame, religion, media influence, and the long-lasting consequences of public scandal. But beyond the public reaction, many legal observers are now asking an even bigger question. Does Josh Duggar still have any realistic legal options remaining? As discussions surrounding the rejected motion continue spreading online, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The Duggar family remains one of the most controversial reality television families in modern media history. For years, the family built a massive public platform centered around faith, traditional values, and the image of a tightly united household. But repeated controversies, scandals, and legal battles have dramatically changed the way many members of the public view that image. And now, this latest courtroom decision has once again pushed the family back into national headlines. Whether people see the judge's ruling as a routine enforcement of strict legal procedures, or as a frustrating technical setback that prevented deeper review, the decision has reignited intense public debate across social media, news coverage, and online discussion forums. Supporters argue that courts must follow clear filing deadlines in order to preserve consistency and fairness within the legal system. Critics, meanwhile, continue debating whether procedural rules can sometimes overshadow broader questions about justice and due process. At the center of all of this remains Josh Duggar himself, a former reality television figure whose legal troubles continue, drawing enormous public attention years after his conviction. And because the Duggar family spent so many years living in the public eye, every new development quickly becomes part of a much larger national conversation about celebrity culture, media influence, religious image building, and accountability. Many online observers also believe the ongoing fascination with the Duggar story reflects something deeper about modern internet culture itself. Audiences have become increasingly interested in what happens behind carefully managed public personas, especially when those personas were built around morality, family values, and public trust. In many ways, the continued attention surrounding this case shows how reality television fame can permanently blur the line between private legal matters and public entertainment. At the same time, legal experts continue reminding viewers that procedural deadlines are not minor technicalities in the court system. Filing rules, timing requirements, and appeal procedures exist because courts rely on structure and consistency in order to function properly. Missing a deadline, even by a small margin, can dramatically affect the outcome of a case, regardless of the broader arguments being presented. Still, despite the latest setback, many observers believe public discussions surrounding Josh Duggar's legal battle are far from finished. Future appeals, additional filings, or new legal developments could continue keeping the case in the headlines for months or even years to come. And because the Duggar family remains such a recognizable public name, media attention surrounding any future update is likely to remain intense. For now, though, this ruling represents another major chapter in a legal saga that has already generated years of public controversy, debate, and scrutiny. And regardless of where public opinion ultimately lands, one thing is certain. The Duggar family's story continues to spark powerful reactions from audiences across the country, and the conversation surrounding this case is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.